Okay, and we are live. Thank you everyone for joining us today. So my name is Angela McArdle. I am the chair of the National Libertarian Party and the chair of the Libertarian Party of Los Angeles County for just a couple more months until they have elections and get someone else in. And we are live streaming specifically right now for California candidates into the California Libertarian Party social media assets and as many other places as we can get our message out. I am also a Californian, and so I'm very interested in hearing from you all. So the Libertarian Party is committed to advancing personal and economic freedom for the people of the United States. And while there are some small differences between members about whether or not government should exist at all, we all agree that the size and scope of government needs to be scaled back dramatically. Generally speaking, we oppose heavy taxes, if not all taxation. We oppose impediments to free trade. We oppose the drug war. We believe that consenting adults have the natural right to decide what they do with their own bodies. And we believe very strongly in the Second Amendment. And while we can't endorse any of the lovely candidates who are here with us today because they're not registered libertarians, we do, as libertarians, need to decide who we will vote for since we don't have our own candidate running in this election cycle. So we thank you very much for coming on, and we're really excited to hear from you. The first thing that we're going to do is have 3-minute opening statements. And so why don't we go clockwise, and we will have James Hanning start, followed by Renee Cinnamon, followed by Frederick Schultz. James, take it away.
All right, I'm going to start. Thanks for this chance. Much appreciated. Grand Rapids, Michigan is my hometown, though I've lived in California for more than 4 decades. My wife, Elizabeth, and I have been married for 54 years, and we have 6 children and 6 grandchildren. Our family, like our neighborhood here in Inglewood, is racially diverse. As a Vietnam-era conscientious objector, I did alternative service with the Michigan Migrant Ministry from 1968 to 1970. 2 takeaways. I saw real poverty, and I learned some Spanish. In 1975, I received a doctorate in philosophy from Michigan State University. My dissertation title was Persons, Rights, and the Problem of Abortion. My director was the redoubtable Rhoda Coatson. After 40 years of teaching philosophy, both at the graduate and undergraduate level at Loyola Marymount University, I redirected. I do lots of academic writing. I also blog for the New Oxford Review, and I have a video cast every other week called The Open Door. Let me share with you my statement in the California Primary Election Voters Guide. At the cost of $25 a word, I found that brevity was the key to solvency. At any rate, this is what I wrote. After 43 years here, I know California well. I represent the American Solidarity Party, an advocate for solidarity, decentralism, religious liberty, and the duties of conscience, each in light of the common good. My priority is to win legal recognition of the dignity of life at every stage. Women deserve better than abortion. The dying deserve our care, not a suicide ticket. We need to appreciate the contributions of immigrants. I champion fairness in housing, schools, and the workplace, while supporting increased home ownership, a living wage, affordable childcare, and managing our natural resources responsibly. Visit us at solidarityparty.org or American Solidarity Party of California.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's go now to Renee Cinnamon.
Thank you. And thank you for the opportunity. And it's a great pleasure to be with two candidates here running for governor of California. My name is Renee Cinnamon. I am a fourth generation Californian, and I am a two-time mayor, vice mayor, and council member of a small town called Nevada City in Northern California. And I do want to make it clear that even though I have been spending 20 years in and out of government, I'm not a career politician. We never got paid for being on the council or mayor. I am running with a no party affiliation because it's at this point in time impossible to serve the people and the party simultaneously because of a 2010 Supreme Court decision known as Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission. Ever since then, big money has completely infiltrated politics as we know it. So I'm here basically to change the current political paradigm. This campaign we have is actually going to supersede and will continue no matter the outcome of this primary election. We're really trying to create a cultural shift. So what we've done is about a year and a half ago, I created a 30-page contract with Californians, and this is a blueprint for California. It's a way out. And basically, we're focused on building an economy on restoration and healing. And we are also basing it on what's called the seventh generation principle, which is every decision we make today should serve 7 generations from now. I know as a former elected official, as a community activist, really building up community resiliency and reliancy, I've always been asking, how do we measure our leadership? How do we know we're serving the future and we're doing a good job? Well, this is where the 7th generation principle comes in. And so also we've been focusing on smaller government, protecting bodily autonomy, protecting the Second Amendment, returning the rule of law, bringing back accountability and responsibility to the California government, and making sure that we actually can take care of the biggest issues facing California. I do have a beautiful plan for the homelessness. We have a plan for reducing crime. We have a plan actually to rebuild our local and regional economies through what's called the infrastructure bank, a public bank that most Californians don't even know exists. So all I ask for is that people actually vote tomorrow, Tuesday, if they have not as of yet. People do not realize, the media is not covering this, but this is actually the most important election in the history of California. Not only our fate of the next 4 years, but for future generations are in the balance. And if you have not voted, if you've never voted, if you've waited for the general election to vote, it will be too late by then. The die is being cast tomorrow. Get on the phone, contact as many people as you can. We expect only about 7 million people to vote out of the registered 22 million tomorrow, which is an absolute crime. So please vote like your lives depend upon it, because they do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, and now we will turn to Mr. Frederick Schultz. Please take it away.
Hi, Ms. McCardle, and thank you all for joining me, and thank you for having me so much. It's an honor. I'm very moved. Happy you found me. The reason I'm running, first of all, I'm a lawyer. I'm what I call a human rights lawyer because for 3 years I fought a voting rights case to throw Trump out. Well, first to ban him from being sworn in and then to throw him out because he had lost by 3 million votes. And the way I read the Constitution and many other prominent lawyers read the Constitution, including Erwin Chemerinsky, who's the dean of Bolt Law School, is that we have the rights to an equal vote, and that the 14th Amendment, which says equal protection of the laws, overrules the 12th Amendment written 100 years earlier, which calls for the Electoral College. Also, there's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that we signed, which says we have the right to equal and universal voting. And also we have the... what else? Sorry, the 9th Amendment, which says that nothing in our Constitution shall be construed to steal our rights otherwise. And my whole point is, yeah, we have the right to an equal vote, and that's that. And they stole it, and they've been stealing it by having the Senate. And also we signed the ICCPR, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. That's a treaty enacting half of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Anyway, we still have to enact the other half of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, calling for our economic and social rights, which the Senate and President Carter signed 30, 40, 45 years ago, and it still hasn't been enacted. Anyway, my point is, I deeply believe, I've always known we have the rights to do to our own bodies as we wish. As Jefferson says, the legitimate powers of government extend to such acts only as are injurious to others. And then he says that means we don't have the right, as long as we're not robbing or injuring somebody, the government has no right to be bothered, to bother us. We have in this state, we have, it's hard to get our hands on the numbers, but approximately 200,000 people in our jail, 225,000 people in our jails. They freed about 25,000 people in the last year or two. I was very against these lockdowns. I feel that the main cause of crime is the drug laws, which have created these prices to go through the roof. And also we need economic development. I want a small wealth tax on the richest 1%, which is a net worth over 10 million, so that we can lower taxes on everyone else, and or an income over $1 million. So that's where I would differ with the Libertarian Party. And I would want our human rights enforced, which would mean human rights to housing. Although for the homeless, I want real housing, but in the meantime, I want to get them off the streets in 3 months. We could pay for 4,000 tiny little trailers, and build concrete structures for them, and that would be way cheaper than they spent $100,000 per homeless person in the state last year. First of all, I think they're lying and saying that there's 500,000 homeless in the country. And I would want to, I'm sure there's millions. I would want to build a trailer for every one of them. And then I'd want free college, forgiving student loans, free healthy food. I think that instead of lockdowns, they should have just had healthy food for us. And we could have had no lockdowns, no deaths, almost no deaths, and prosperity. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go into our first question. We're gonna start with Renee, and then to Frederick, and then to James. Governor Newsom has, I'm sure you're all very familiar and you remember it, he made very liberal use of emergency powers during the lockdowns. In your opinion, what constitutes an actual emergency at the state level? Oh, you're muted. Let me unmute you. There you go. Oh, Renee, you're still muted.
There you go.
There you go.
Right. What constitutes the reason for this authority is if there's imminent and immediate danger to Californians. We could have seen that within the first few weeks once we were trying to reduce the curve and flatten that curve. But soon after it became very apparent that basically this was an abuse of power. So within 2 weeks, we should have been done. And right now, what he's doing is absolutely 100% unconstitutional. And in fact, in June of 2020, I was the only elected official to call out Newsom's illegal mask mandate that was made statewide. And I did call out the fact that he did not have unilateral power to make this type of law or to force medical devices on our faces, and that this was going to be the beginning of a slippery slope. And as you could all well imagine, all hell broke out from the LA Times to SF Gate to the SAC-B. They were eviscerating me. And I just quickly said, I'm not talking about the efficacy of masks. I'm talking about the overreach of government, which is what we've been having to deal with ever since.
Thank you very much. Frederick, let's pass it on to you.
So we have 1 minute, is that it?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. First of all, as far as the lockdowns go, I was opposed from, I did support it when it was proposed. The minute that my mayor locally started to lock down, and within a few hours, I got a text from a bar, a live music venue, one of 2 or 3 in San Diego I'd been to once, saying, we're laying off all our workers, please donate money, buy our merchandise so they can get it. And I knew that quickly we'd have tens of millions of unemployed people in our country, and that we wouldn't take care of them, and they'd be homeless and starving, and it would ripple around the world. And I changed my mind within hours. I started to be like, we can't do this. But instead, Newsom went ahead and did it. And as far as masks, I mean, look, what he should have been doing, all scientists have been saying for years, we had to anticipate that a pandemic was going to come. It would be aerosol transmitted, and we should have been stockpiling N95 masks and made them optional to whoever wanted. And as I said, we should have been having free organic food for people and begging them to do it, and banning it in the schools and banning it in the free food program. But as far as emergency powers, look, we have no right to, right now, we don't have a right to democracy. I would say it's an emergency because they want to steal our rights to gun control. They want to steal our rights, although I support the right to carry, and they don't do that. But they want to steal our rights to abortion. How dare they? It's not a fetus. A fetus is not a baby until it's born. So I say we have an emergency right. We got to start arresting the senators from other states for stealing our votes, and arresting the electors to the electoral college for stealing our votes. That are in California, our votes count 1/3 to 1/2 of those of other people. So that's where I would start with emergency powers. And none of these lockdowns. I'm offended and horrified, and he made us poor. How dare they? That's the number one. That's why we have this crime. That's why we have starvation. That's why we have this war now. Enough already. Okay, that's a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. James, in your opinion, what constitutes an actual emergency at the state level?
I think an actual emergency is pretty much what we had, an immediate threat to life. In the context of a discussion that's about to head off into the land of conspiracy, I'd like to point out that in this country, 1 million people have died of COVID. That's something to take about as seriously as you could take anything. I have no objection to masks. I have no objection to other people having the vaccine. I chose not to have the vaccine, not because I don't think there is an emergency, and not because I'm opposed to vaccines in general. What I'm opposed to is the use of tissue from aborted babies. And as our learned colleague Schultz makes his usual and expected faces, I'd like to remind him that fetus is not the name of a species. Fetus is the name of a human being at a certain level of development. And I hope on the shelf behind him, he has a dictionary. Now, I would say as well that there were terrible mistakes during the lockdown. First mistake was largely the abandonment of the elderly and the infirm in nursing homes. I think this was criminal, and that's what I would chiefly fault Newsom on. I would also fault people in my own faith community, as it's now called. I think a lot of us were overly passive. I think we could have pretty well avoided the worst of the virus pandemic at its worst stage had we had the discipline to space ourselves out.
All right, thank you. So we're going to go straight into a question about abortion. We're going to start with Frederick because I have a feeling he wants to provide a little bit of rebuttal. So let's dovetail that into the following question. Do you think that California should take any response to what a lot of people anticipate is going to be the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade? And if you think we should take any action, what do you think it should be?
First of all, this Supreme Court was appointed by, as I said, a president who was illegitimately in power. The 3 judges who he appointed, plus 2 that Bush appointed, including Robertson, I think it's Alito, who, Bush would not have been in power the second time if he hadn't stolen power the first time with their help when he had lost to Gore by 500,000 votes. So, and on top of that, I don't believe they have the right to tell us to do our own bodies as we other way than we wish. That, so they're violating our human rights. And as I said, the 9th Amendment says our human rights are our constitutional rights, even if it doesn't say it in the Constitution. So these would be illegitimate laws. And I'm sure that if right now they say that the states can do what they want, I'm sure that very soon in the next case, they'll say abortion is murder. We're arresting all women. We're arresting the doctors who want to do it, just like they arrest people for using drugs or selling drugs to people. My point is, what should we do? We should say California is safe for all women in the country who want an abortion, period. And that means until birth, period. That Roe v. Wade decision was way wrongfully decided by letting the state do anything to a woman. You can't force a woman to have a baby. They usually these pregnancies, giving birth involves episiotomies where they take a knife and slash down from the vagina, or they cut open their stomachs with a C-section. This isn't right, and it's slavery, and it's forced pregnancy, and hell no, we're not going back to the Handmaid's Tale. Hell no.
All right. Thank you, Frederick. James, we're going to go to you, and then we're going to go to Renette. What action do you think California should take, if any, if the Supreme Court overturns Roe versus Wade?
Well, I'd like to begin by saying that It's very easy to speak of abortion, and a lot of words that end with TION easily morph into abstractions. What we're speaking of is the deliberate destruction of a preborn human being. That's what it's all about. Now, what I would suggest is that California, instead of trying to shut down crisis pregnancy centers, give them some real support. Kamala Harris and Javier Becerra were instrumental in trying to force crisis pregnancy centers to advertise, where people who are oftentimes in a terrible bind can get help in the deliberate destruction of a preborn human being. Instead, the governor has decided to take $125 million to offer support for people coming to California for abortion. I take this to be abominable.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Renette, your turn. If California were to take any action to Roe versus Wade being overturned, what would that be, if we should take any action at all?
Well, first of all, I think it needs to be duly noted that once again, a very divisive wedge issue is brought up right before an important election again. And I think that Americans should really catch on to this type of political manipulation that does not serve any of us. I would hope that people become less a single issue based on when selecting their candidates. With that said, personally, I could not and have never had to have an abortion. I don't personally support it, but I believe that the governor's business ends with my skin. Now, with that said, I have a few caveats. If we're going to actually broach this topic at the moment a woman's walking into a clinic, it's too late. If we're going to broach the topic when she's in the bedroom with her husband or partner, it's too late. There's a multi-pronged approach here. First of all, when a child's 4 years old and naturally becomes a theologian, asking, where did I come from? Where did grandmother go when she died? What's the difference between a boy and a girl? This is the moment you talk about how beautiful life is, how important the role of a parent is, how bringing a child into the world is the most important job in the world, right? Then before girls and boys become adults, we actually give them some biological sex education. I remember in 6th grade, I had it for half a day, and we teach them the difference between an egg and a sperm and ovulation and how to get pregnant and how not to get pregnant, so that we reduce the need for pregnancies to begin with. Now, with that said, I do not support late-term abortions, unless the mother's life is at risk. But I have no way or capacity to tell anybody whether or not they should have a child, have the capacity to raise a child, if there's health risks or not. This belongs to the mother, the father, and possibly even the medical advisor, the doctor. Also, with that said, we are stressing the importance of these lives, and it's true, they're very important lives. But I would hope that we'd equally stress the need for prenatal care, for parental leave, for the first 5 years, for teaching parents how to parent again, so we stop that feedback loop of early and unwanted pregnancies. So this is a multi-pronged approach. But once again, I say quite clearly that for the most part, the government's body stops with my skin, and that's across the board with anything medically related.
Thank you very much. Let's turn to James for our next question. And that is, what can you do as governor to address the homelessness crisis that you've seen in our cities?
First thing I do as governor is encourage every Californian who has an apartment, who has a home, who has a stable living situation, to get to know on a personal level some homeless people. I had a wonderful opportunity about 3 weeks now back to go to a homeless encampment in Venice, California. And the people in that encampment were really organized, and they were receptive to people's discussing their situation with them. And as I knew, because the California Los Angeles Catholic Worker has been working on this project since the 1990s, so that's about 30 years. What they most need right now, today, not tomorrow, today, is sanitation. There's absolutely no reason why sanitation can't be provided. Not tomorrow, but today. That could be done right away. And all you need to do to recognize that is to go to a homeless camp, get to know some of these people personally, and then stay with them over a period of time. I'm all for all the usual programs, and I think the most important program is immediate housing, real housing, not igloos, real housing, and that could be done right now. Unfortunately, we have a citizen that chiefly reacts to homelessness because they think it's ugly. It is. They think it's unsanitary. It is. But that kind of response doesn't do anything. That's the move them out of the way, hide them away. That's what that's all about.
All right. Thank you very much, James. We'll go to Renee and then Frederick. As governor, what would you do about the homelessness crisis?
Well, first and foremost, I would declare a state of emergency because it's not just a simple homeless crisis. It's a humanitarian crisis. We have upward to 200,000 people on the streets who are in complete crises. Once I declare a state of emergency, I would then actually loosen the building codes. We have a lot of now empty commercial buildings, and in the respective areas where the homeless are, I would loosen the building codes to retrofit for mental health facilities, for drug addiction facilities, and for low-income housing. Once that's underway, I would then actually conduct a triage on the streets. I would actually connect with what's called the community continuum of care. I used to be part of this in Nevada County, California. These are where we have different organizations and agencies come together every single month to deal with the homeless issue. Tap into that, get their data, talk to the homeless shelters, get their data, conduct the triage, and actually take those who are the most at risk to themselves and the surrounding areas, businesses and residences, and get them into the treatment and the wraparound services that they need. Then I would also, of course, take that, the building codes and build that low-income housing and take those who are just down on their luck and identify, once we get them housed, what kind of jobs do you want? Let's reskill you. Let's get you into job placement and housing as well. And I've had people say, well, you can't remove people off the streets. It's not fair. What's not fair is allowing them to actually die in the streets because they're going to. And it's going to become generational. They're not going to remove this or stop this from happening unless we actually assist them, give them a hand up. The other thing is, for those who do not understand, is that you cannot remove people off the streets or under the bridges unless you give them a place to stay. There's a beautiful example in San Antonio, Texas, called Haven for Hope, 22 acres. There's over 180 different non-NGOs, nonprofit organizations for therapy, for reskilling, for wraparound services. It's basically one-stop shopping for the homeless. People are basically in San Antonio. They go to that 22 acres. They can enter into the center. They can be housed. They can be fed. They can get the wraparound services. And if they so choose not to take the services, they can camp on the 22 acres of wooded area. So this is the biggest crisis that California is facing. It's going to get much worse in the next few years. These people are not, unfortunately, going to be able to raise themselves out of it. So right now, it's a state of emergency, and within about 6 months, we could actually clean up if we have the right leadership.
Thank you, Renee. Frederick, as governor, what would you do to address California's homelessness crisis?
Hi. Okay. First of all, when I graduated Columbia in 1990, and so it's 36 years ago, I started to volunteer in homeless shelters. And I wrote about a solution back then in 86. That's how I was named. I won the Truman Scholarship in 86, trying to think up solutions. And then I helped to write model state legislation for the National Coalition for the Homeless that next summer. We've been with this problem a long, long time. Yes, a lot of it was this deinstitutionalization from the, mental hospitals. But the biggest problem is affordability of housing. So, first of all, I do greatly believe we have to have, make the laws much easier to build lots of housing. That's number one. Number two, as and certainly not just expensive housing, but we have to make sure that if the market isn't providing for affordable housing for people, that the government somehow does that. Building affordable housing. No matter, I've tried to crunch the numbers. It looks like that'll cost $10 trillion. I mean, it's going to take a massive infrastructure. However, we have a lot of people who need work. And we could also, if I have my way, we'll be freeing 2 million people from the jails, and pardoning. We need to pardon about 70 million in our who have criminal records who can never get work. So, I would say build lots of housing, build tiny trailers for all the homeless, and huge structures for them, and even allow tiny areas of state parks if we have to have that for the shelters. But the other thing is raise the minimum wage. I've been fighting to do that for 20 years to $20 an hour, and I hope for a 4-day work week. But raising the minimum wage to a living wage would go a long ways towards that. And no more lockdowns. That'll stop us from being poor. And believe me, there's going to be a lot more diseases, and they plan to lock down a lot more, and they're going to keep making us poor unless we stop them. And I will never lock down, no matter what. I promise. Okay.
Thank you, Frederick. We are adding Lewis into the stream, who is also running for office. Thanks for joining us, Lewis. We know you had some other campaign engagements earlier. So we're in the middle of Q&A. And our next question, if you don't mind, we are going to start with you. We're taking about 2 minutes to answer questions. And our next question is going to be actually a question that was submitted by the audience, because I think that it is really important, and it's something that libertarians care very much about. And the question is, considering the deep division of politics and culture between individual states like California versus Texas, do you think a peaceful national divorce is possible or needed?
You're asking me, thank you. I absolutely do not want this country to be rented. You know that it's
Can you move a little bit closer to your microphone? You're a little bit hard to hear.
Is this better now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for that. Yeah, I do think that we need to not exacerbate the divisions already. I think there's a lot more commonality, and I think the commonality has to do with the issue that we all are inflation. We can address that. The homelessness issue has been talked about already. I heard from the comments. I agree with I also think crime is a resolvable issue. I think all these issues are preventable and resolvable, but it's going to take a collective effort. People will say, I've asked me, what are all my answers? I got a lot of ideas, but I don't think I'm that smart. Collectively, you're out. Collectively, we can figure it out. I would like to involve the most impacted people in this issue. John Howard to help with the formerly incarcerated, to help with the mass incarceration system, people who have been pushed out of the job, to help with that issue, to get the collective strength of our state together. So I think we can come together with answers, and I think that would help people cross the divide. It's hard to say how far we can go, but I do think that I feel like I can speak to anybody. One of the things I want to say in a minute is I was a former steel worker. I worked in I was formerly homeless for 2 years. And I don't want to say that because it's a badge of honor. It was horrible. Nobody should have to go through that. But I know what it looks like, and I think that's important for us.
Lewis, we are starting to lose your audio again a little bit.
Okay. Something might
Unplug it. Just unplug it. Unplug it.
It's okay. So we'll let him fiddle with. Yeah, we'll let you fiddle with that a little bit backstage, and then we'll loop you in.
Okay.
You might want to try. Yeah, you might want to try removing that and using just the computer mic. Okay. Let's go to James now, and then to Renette, and then to Frederick. So do you think how do you feel about a peaceful national divorce? Do you think that it's possible? Do you think it's a good idea?
I doubt if it's possible. In principle, there are some advantages to it. Compare and contrast I think right now, China, which is hideously over-centralized, should become deeply decentralized. I think the Soviet Union, which was hideously centralized, should have earlier on become deeply decentralized. I think the United States just kind of came about mostly by military means. And I think that from a, dare I say it, philosophical perspective, it's really too big. And in many respects, not all, but in many respects, it's in need of decentralizing. The difficulty ultimately is we lack a real sense of citizenship. And because we lack a real sense of citizenship, a real commitment to the common good, questions of organization, and I'm in favor of decentralism when it's possible, oftentimes don't advance because you can split a country up and have maybe 10 really bad countries after the split up. So right now, while I'm open in principle to a greater decentralization that would lead to a division of some aspects of the United States from others, what I'm mostly interested in across the board is a deeper sense of citizenship and public responsibility.
Thank you very much. Renette, same question to you. Oh, you're muted.
When we began this campaign, it was designed to supersede the election cycle. And basically what we were trying to do is create a movement, a cultural shift within California and how we actually show up in our own leadership. One of the things we have not fully taken advantage of here in California and 23 other states total is what's called the referendum, where we, the people, can actually write propositions and put them on the ballot for the voters to vote upon. What I would actually encourage is not a divide and conquer, and that is exactly what would happen if the states began to divide and split up. We would be a lot weaker. We'd be better off to actually get together as a unified front, intelligently and strategically use the referendums in each respective state and put into place bills and propositions that support our economy, support our environment, support those who need housing, support those in need. And so I do believe that right now, splitting up is actually the last thing that we would want and the first thing that the CCP would want. So no, I don't support that. I support actually reaching out to the other states and actually approaching this in a more unified front.
Okay. Frederick, same question to you.
Okay, 2 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, I forgot to say from the first question that a pregnancy is always a risk to a woman's life. And from the second question, I forgot to, and birth used to always be the main cause of death of women. And then I forgot to say also in terms of the homeless issue, some people are talking about forcing drug addiction treatment on people. Well, Maya Salovitz in the New York Times, who also went to Columbia, discusses recent article, how forcing addiction treatment never works, and it actually forces people more into drugs, and it's torture and that kind of thing, not to mention oppressive, totalitarian oppression. And anyway, but as far as this question goes, no, I mean, I do not believe in splitting up the country. I think the problem is that we do not have, as I said, we're not a democracy because we don't have an equal vote, or else the our policies would be far more liberal, as or what they call liberal progressive, pro caring, pro human rights, as Michael Moore said in his movie Fahrenheit 11/9. By the way, I do blame Joe Biden for certifying that election with Trump, and I blame Hillary for even conceding when he lost by 3 million votes. They had no reason to do that, no right to do that. But also, we do not have our human rights being protected. It's supposed to be a constitutional democracy, and that means our human rights are not supposed to be up for a vote, so that we should not have our right to abortion up to a vote. We should not have our right to use drugs, any drugs we want, treat our own bodies as best as we want, up to a vote. We should not have our rights to sex work up to a vote. We should not have our rights to even gambling or assisted suicide up to a vote. These are our human rights, and that's the problem, is they're stealing it. Once we have a democracy and our human rights honored, we'll come together more as a nation, and we'll be loving each other more instead of at each other's throats. That's my answer to that.
Thank you very much. Okay, our next question, and we'll go back with Luis. Luis, how is your sound?
Got it going?
Can you hear me now? Is it better?
Yes. Excellent. Great.
Okay, good.
Okay, so we'll start with you. Our next question is about taxes. Do you think California's taxes are too high? And if so, are there any taxes that you would cut or completely eliminate?
The taxes are a mess. They're all over the place. And I don't think it makes any sense to keep taxing people at the levels that they are. I find them to be totally unrational, what some of the taxing is going on. I do think things have to be taxed. I really do believe that there's a fair share issue. There's a lot of corporations that just do not pay nowhere near. They got lawyers, they can get away from it. I'm a self-employed person. I know what you could take off for for all your business and stuff, but I know how people can manipulate that and use it. And you got big money, big lawyers, you can do it. The problem is the regular working class, middle class struggle of these people are not getting properly serviced for all the taxes they pay. That's the main thing. And so I think it's all a mess. It has to be redone, reset, reimagined, as young people say. I think we have to reset the whole tax system. I think it's a way to make it fair. People forget that in the 50s, when there was so-called the best time, I don't think it was, but let's just say it was good up to a point. People were taxed, the rich were taxed 70 to 90%. They didn't complain then. Things have changed so much. They fought very hard not to be taxed anymore. They got taxed a lot because it made sense. There was an industry. There was all these manufacturing. Again, I don't mind talking about my previous work in that area because one of the things that led to homelessness is the industrial base of the state being completely out. I saw it. By 1984, there was 300 plants in LA completely gone. Mills, plants. There was GMs. There was aerospace. There was defense. There was steel mills. All that was gone. I saw it leave, and we forget that led to the kind of homelessness we're seeing. It got exacerbated with the crisis. Housing got bad. So I think the tax system has to be completely reimagined.
Okay. Thank you very much. Let's go to James. James, do you think California's taxes are too high? And if so, are there any particular taxes that you'd cut?
I think they're too low on the super rich. In fact, I think they're too low on the rich. It's interesting how so many people look to the super rich as the only people who should be taxed as they deserve to be taxed. I think the rich also ought to be taxed. I'm very much in favor of progressive taxation. Now, right now, it's a crazy sort of a thing. The state of California has almost more money than it knows what to do with. It might know what to do with it if it had a better sense of what people really need. And I have no doubt that in particular ways, at particular levels, there should be a reduction of taxes. I would think, for example, when it comes to, and this might be the only thing other than the importance of good dental hygiene that I agree with Frederick Schultz about, we ought to have recognition that working people and people who need houses need to have fewer taxes on the construction of houses and fewer taxes on the construction of new small businesses. Construction of housing, development of new businesses, I think the taxes should be cut back there significantly.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Renee now. Do you think California's taxes are too high? And if so, is there anything you would cut?
Well, first of all, we are experiencing the art of war. If you want to destroy society from the inside out, you overtax it and you create incredible cost of living inflation. That's exactly what we're experiencing. California is experiencing death by 1,000 cuts, and our leaders are completely responsible for this. The first thing I would actually do is I would require a third-party certified financial and operational audit on everything state-related, and I'd actually start with the most bloated budgets of all. we are overtaxed for sure. It's absolutely destroying businesses, causing a massive exodus. People cannot put food on the table. So if we want to reduce the cost of living, we reduce how much we're paying in taxes. Once we identify that economic bleed, we rein that in, and that reduces the cost of living all across the board. But then we also have to really take a serious look at the income tax. And I'm not opposed to a progressive tax whatsoever, but we're even overtaxed with the income tax. We need to look at the death tax. We need to look at the capital gains tax. Why is it in businesses, and I'm a former two-time business owner, that every single year a business owner has to pay sales tax on their property? That's insane in perpetuity. So this is what we need to do, is just reduce the amount of tax altogether. That will reduce the cost of living. And I do believe that, and also axe the gas tax. They should have done that months ago when we had the ability to do that with Assemblymember Kevin Kiley. So as long as we continue to tax at the level we're taxing, we will be destroying California from the inside out, which does seem to be the goal of our elected officials as it currently stands.
Thank you, Renette. And Frederick, how about you? Are California's taxes too high? And if so, is there anything you'd cut?
Okay, first of all, yes, they are, but I think that for those at the very top, over 1 million, say, earnings, or over 10 million net worth, we should have a small wealth tax. I was running for president for 20 years, starting in 2001, to try to prevent and then end the overseas wars, and prevent the war on drugs. And a big part of my campaign, I was trying to think, how do we have the richest country in the world and we never have any money for anything? And it hit me that we need a small wealth tax. I don't think in the end it'll cost us anything, because if we go, say, 3% over 10 million net worth, thinking about 6% over 100 million, and about 10% over $1 billion, we would raise trillions. I mean, the net worth of the people in our state is at least $6 trillion. It could be over 10 or 15 trillion, but we have 1/4 of the nation's billionaires and the richest 1/4, and probably some of the richest billionaires in the world. Now, we do have to stop over-regulation of businesses. That is driving a lot of businesses out. I also believe that we should be taxing nonprofits, because some of them have so much money and they're not nonprofits anymore. They're making a lot. We got to tax the church, that kind of thing. What would I cut? I've always been fighting for my whole life to end all sales taxes and the gas taxes. I think those are, that's not right. Those are regressive, not progressive by definition. I would try to have no taxes on anyone under $50,000 and lower taxes on everyone else. I don't think that state and federal ever should be above 50%. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Louis is still trying to adjust his microphone settings, so we're going to have him work on that for a little bit more and bring him back at the end. So our next question, and we're going to start with James, is, do you think that California should take any action in response to mass shootings? I'm thinking particularly about the one that we just saw happen on the news and that everybody was very upset about.
I think we should take a number of measures. One is we should keep restrictions on gun sales and, when possible, make them more restrictive. I would like to eliminate all assault weapons. Another thing we could do, and we have such a huge budget surplus, is we could have a major drug buyback. I think we could do that at a lot of different levels, and I would like to see that done. And then I think we should, by way of example, talk about in many ways, but always bringing it back to this obvious, hideous atrocity of these mass killings. We should talk about having a consistent ethics of life. Right now, California, courtesy of University of Berkeley, Lawrence Livermore Laboratory, we pretty much run under the aegis of the state of California the stockpiling and development of nuclear weapons. Who is it that controls the nuclear weapons arsenal? Well, we do. Now, I'm sure that a lot of other places in the country, and of course across the world, would love to control the nuclear weapons stockpile. But in this regard, we've pretty much forgotten what we're doing. we're committed to a policy of mass weapon development. And so things ring hollow as you go down the scale to individual gun owners. So yes, gun buyback, complete restriction, elimination of assault weapons, but also unless we have a culture of life, none of these things are really going to change. When we have all these angry young men and all of these angry young men with real mental disturbances, we ought to ask ourselves, why? Why? It's because we're in a culture of death.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's go to Renee next. What do you think that California should do, if anything, in response to mass shootings like the one that happened recently?
What happened recently in Texas is a terrible, terrible tragedy. Once again, I do want to duly note, though, that since the repeal of what's known as the Smith-Mundt Act in 2012 with the National Defense Authorization Act, the Smith-Mundt Act made it illegal for the U.S. government to propagandize and utilize psychological warfare against Americans on American soil. They could do it on foreign, but not American soil. Since then, there has been a dramatic uptick in these events, and I just think that needs to be noted. We have to understand something. And I've traveled a lot in Africa. I was in apartheid, at the height of apartheid in South Africa in 86, 87. I was a 19, 20-year-old girl hitchhiking through townships. I was in Uganda, Rwanda, when they were being slaughtered there. And I've had people say to me, Renee, we need to have the guns removed because our government would never do that to us. They'd never turn on us. And I'm like, you're right. Our government never would. But our government is gone. The government we knew of past is not the government we have today. It's been taken over by nefarious actors and a lot of big dark money. So my point is this: our forefathers, and there are letters where they were actually debating whether or not to include cannons in the Second Amendment. These guns are not for hunting. These guns are to protect ourselves from the possibility of a tyrannical government. That's what they're for. Now, when it comes to the school shootings, we can create a single entry point. We can do all this different stuff. But the truth of the matter is we have a mental health crisis as well. We have young people who are not getting therapy. They're on social media. They're on violent games. They don't have good parenting around them. They don't have a good fabric of community around them. They don't have an extended family whatsoever. This is actually a cry for help. What we need to be doing is focusing on the mental health side as well as reducing all the psychiatric drugs that they're on. We have not even studied the synergy of these different drugs that they're using in developing bodies. So we can go out there and we can get rid of all the guns we want to. But if I were a person suffering and wanting to take out a school full of children, I could easily do it with my car as they're crossing the crosswalk. This is not going to stop these deadly deaths. These are not going to stop these crimes. We have to actually address the fact that we are a very, very unwell country.
Thank you very much. Lewis is going to rejoin us in just a moment. He's updated his sound. Let's go to Frederick now.
Hi. Okay. First of all, as far as the Second Amendment goes, I do think that it refers to militias and not people. However, I also believe we have a right to self-defense. So I do believe that we should have a right to carry a small handgun, which in this state we pretty much don't. I've read that in most states, when you have a right to carry, the issuance of licenses is about 5%. And in this state, it's 1/3 of 1%, meaning about 14 out of 15 people who apply for a right to carry don't have it. I do think we have to bring that back. But I also think we need strong background checks, strong training. As far as this, even red flag laws, look, I'm scared that they'll take them away from people who they shouldn't be. But so then you have a right to appeal or something like that. But I definitely think we need to. I'm mourning these kids in Uvalde and in Sandy Hook and all these murders. It's horrible. I've been fighting for years for one armed guard per class in every room, and we could pay for that with a wealth tax. That's how you pay for that. That's how you protect these kids. And I've always been saying we don't need to, get rid of the police, but we need to repurpose them to protecting us against these mass shootings instead of arresting us for victimless crimes. And I certainly believe we need much more mental health care. But, I forgot to mention in one of my previous answers, but as far as taxes go, Newsom wasted $30 billion in these lockdown payments, not to mention the $100 billion, which wouldn't have been needed if he hadn't locked us down. But the $30 billion He wasted by not doing any fraud prevention. That's a big crime. And this made us all poor, and that's made these people going crazy. And as far as kids going nuts, the main thing is sugar in the schools and allowing kids to eat sugar and processed food. And that's what drives them crazy. Then they treat them with these antidepressants, antipsychotics, and amphetamines, which they don't work at all. They need more talk treatment and that kind of thing. And then they go totally nuts, along with losing their hope in life because of the lockdowns, which has made them all depressed and dropping out of school. Okay.
Thank you, Frederick. Okay, Louis, how is your sound?
Does it sound better?
Great. Yes.
Good. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we were talking about the recent mass shooting,
Yeah.
and wondering if there's anything that you think California should do to prevent shootings like that going forward.
Well, I'm in agreement with the gun reform. I'm in agreement there are guns that don't need to be in our streets. I am for the Second Amendment. People should be able to have guns if they want them. I don't like guns. I have no guns. I grew up in a gang neighborhood. I was in a gang. I had a terrible relationship with guns. That's me personally. I won't take it away from other people. I personally don't think I need guns, and most people around my neighborhood don't need guns. But that's another issue. The issue that I want to raise, and I think it was touched upon by Frederick, is what happens on the front end with these young people. They're so isolated now. They're so alienated. There's so much disconnection. Young people don't feel that there's community anymore. They don't feel that there's elders, and there's no feel there's initiations or even a caring of being able to see them again. I think we need to do more on the front end to help young people who are lost, confused, suicidal, homicidal, all kinds of things. I would like to see a lot more of that money being put there, as well as all the safety that we can put out there. But let's help our young people. Let's have not scared straight, but cared straight. Really care for young people again.
Very nice. Thank you. So we're going to do 2 more rounds of questions, and then we're going to go to closing statements. The next question is on housing. What do you think is the primary cause of high housing costs in California? And is there anything that California could do to change that, to lower the cost of housing? We'll start with James, and then we'll circle back around.
Thank you. I think that the primary cause of our housing shortage is really, this will take some explanation, our capitalist system. So much of what we do is profit driven, and that's certainly the case in real estate. When we build, we're building because it's profitable. And so long as profit rules what we do, we'll suffer. The rich will get richer and the poor will get poorer. What we need to do at so many levels is have worker ownership, not the state's ownership, not ownership on the part of stockholders, but ownership on the part of people who do the work. They need to be represented. If we change the real estate system from people hoping to strike it rich to people who, instead of becoming go-getters, wanted to become go-givers, if we had the kind of communities that would build their own houses rather than turn it over to the for-profit sector, this would change. This would change. And until we have really an ownership society, we're going to have these fundamental problems on so many fronts. One of them is public communications. I read the New York Times and the LA Times, and I read them because I want to figure out what's gone wrong. And what's gone wrong at the get-go is that they're privately owned by people who are in it for the money.
All right. Thank you, James. Renette, let's go to you next. Same question. What do you think is the primary cause of high housing costs in California? And is there anything that California's government or the governor can do to address it?
Well, first and foremost, before people even begin to break ground, they have to pay tens and tens of thousands of dollars just in fees and licenses and taxes just to start building. We need to reduce that at the county level. The other thing is too is that we have become very accustomed to building our wooden structures that are actually not very great as far as in fire prone areas. And I think we need to really start addressing and opening up building codes to allow us to use super adobe, hempcrete, hay bale, straw bale, different materials that are actually more local, regionally based. Smaller is better. These are better insulated. They can actually survive catastrophic fires. And we also can utilize that sweat equity. We can start teaching people how to build these type of homes, right? They don't have to be big homes. They can be relatively small. So those are the big things right there. And it really starts right there with the county, at the county building, with the codes. And they're too restrictive and they're too expensive. And once we reduce that and we allow the different types of building materials, we can actually really start confronting and reducing the price of housing costs altogether.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go now to Frederick. I'd love to hear your opinion on the cost of housing.
Okay, I will. First of all, I forgot to say in the last answer, as far as solving the gun problem, the problem is that other states, some don't have gun control. So the only way to do that would be to have a democracy, which, as I said, I would arrest, the senators or the electors who are stealing our rights to an equal vote. But also, I was upset that Newsom appointed an attorney general who does not suit for a right to an equal vote, like I did for 3 years, to throw Trump out. And I spoke to Dan Kapelovitz, who's running for AG, and he will suit for a right to an equal vote. That way, we can have universal gun control. Although, as I said, I deeply believe in our right to carry. As far as housing goes, look, it is all these regulations, which, NIMBY, we have to allow large buildings, not everywhere. We want a lot of open areas where it's banned, where we like parks in New York City, but we also want, like Central Park is half of New York City, but you also want, and parks spread out throughout everywhere, but you also do want areas where you build huge amounts of high housing, whether it's, and that means, taking away all rules that ban that. And just, I'm not talking just an extra thing in the backyard. That's ridiculous. No, we need some, in one little area, you could have thousands of houses. I mean, what we call skyscrapers, that kind of thing. That's the main way to do that. Was that the question? Was how do we solve the housing? That's your question. I mean,
yeah. Are the housing costs too high, and is there any way that we can lower them?
Yes, I mean, but of course they're too high. But as I really think the lockdowns had a lot to drive this disparity. Housing somehow. I mean, the income inequality and the way that it made the rich richer and the poor poorer has made these houses go up in value, 30% in the last year here. That wouldn't have happened without these lockdowns. And I can promise we will be having many more pandemics rolling through, whether they're, and I will never lock down, even if eating sugar isn't the solution, even if it's something horrible. I would say, we'll distribute free masks, we'll have oxygen, but we need double or triple the number of medical workers, or quadruple, even given this last problem, but no lockdowns, and then we won't have this. But and as far as I've even read that trailers, they ban some people from having, they have new rules that even if it has wheels, they have a right to regulate. This is ridiculous. But I love Renette's idea of expanding what kind of building materials, and just, loosening up the rules will go a long way.
Okay. Thank you, James. Louis, same question to you regarding California's housing costs. Do you think they're too high, and is there anything that can be done to lower them?
Well, there are things that I feel are necessities, and they should be taken out of the market system. I think James was talking about capitalism. I think we have to reevaluate and reimagine the whole capitalist system. Right now, there are things that are common to all of us: air, land, soil, water. And yet they're being held by big private companies. They're being held by developers. These things, I think, are common, that we should make sure they're available as a necessity. Housing is a necessity. It is a luxury. People should be able to have decent housing. They should be able to have access to it. It shouldn't be owned by banks, and then banks control how much you pay, don't pay, whether you pay or not. I get that people can profit so much out of it, but that's been the problem. A few people are profiting. You're competing in this market with big developers who buy clusters of homes. You're not competing against my neighbor next door who wants another house. You're competing with big, huge, giant developments that have taken over, and they've also been behind some of the council people who are now facing arrest. because of some corruption related to big developments. I feel the market system has to be completely taken out as far as housing, just like healthcare, just like these necessities, education. These are not luxuries. We need them as necessities. People should have access. The worst kind of poverty is the poverty of access.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so our last question is going to be something that maybe you guys you don't hear very frequently. There's something called the Defend the Guard movement. It's a piece of legislation and a movement attached to it in the United States that seeks to lobby for legislation at the state level that would empower governors, like yourselves potentially, to refuse to deploy their state's National Guard outside of the United States without a formal declaration of war from Congress. So let me explain that one more time. The Defend the Guard movement in the United States is trying to lobby to get a piece of legislation passed at the state level in every state that would empower governors like yourselves to refuse to deploy their state's National Guard out of the United States without a formal declaration of war from Congress. Would you support or oppose such legislation as governor? For context, most of the wars in the United States over the past 25 years have been undeclared, and that's what people get very riled up about. So let's start with James.
I would welcome such legislation. I think it's a terrific idea. In general, today, given the kind of weapons we're working with, it's still technically technically possible to have a just war, but practically it's impossible to have a just war, especially because any war we fight ultimately rests on our threat to use nuclear weapons. So I hadn't heard about that, Angela. Thanks for informing me. I would be a zealous supporter.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to Renette. Do you need me to repeat it since it was kind of a mouthful?
No, I mean, I would support it. I do not trust, I do not support outsourcing our, California National Guard, essentially. We have been in a series of unjust wars for several decades now. So I think having a proper declaration would be good. And I actually want to tag on real quickly. We were talking about housing. I realized I didn't say this, and this is important. I want to get to it. We need some legislation in California that stops the predatory corporations like BlackRock, Blackstone, and Vanguard, who are literally buying up about 5,000 homes in California. Right now, there are around 200,000 homes that they have purchased. And these are going to be forever rental homes. And these are first level entry homes that will never be back on the market. So when we're talking about the housing crisis and the price of housing, it's because these predatory corporations have come in and they plan on making sure that the World Economic Forum's you will own nothing and be happy is actually literally underway right now. So I just had a dovetail on that. I didn't conclude that in the last answer, but I do not believe in outsourcing our California Guard unless we actually really are at a real war.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to James now, and I'll repeat the question for you and Luis. The Defend the Guard movement in the United States seeks to lobby for legislation at the state level that would empower governors to refuse to deploy their state's National Guard outside the United States without a formal declaration of war from Congress. Would you support such legislative measures as governor?
You mean Frederick?
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Oh, you're asking
I'm so
me?
sorry. Frederick, yes.
That's okay. Sorry, I heard you say James, and I was waiting for.
You're right.
Okay, first of all, I did forget to say in the last question, as far as rent control, I'm opposed in general, but right now we have an emergency, so I would only do it as a short-term as an emergency issue. And second of all, I forgot to say that we should be, because Newsom is the one who caused everybody to be poor by doing these lockdowns, I think that we should take some of this surplus and use it to pay back people's rent who have can't afford it. Also, all these people who, even though I'm pro-vax, I'm anti-vax mandate, and these people who they fired wrongfully, I think that we should pay their back wages, if any difference between what they were earning and earned over the last few years. As far as wars, I did try to prevent the war in Afghanistan, even after 9/11. I felt that this was 10 people or 20 people who did it, at the time backed by about 100 evil people in a gang, which They had a big name, but it was just a gang. I think they owned 1 acre in Afghanistan. I think we should have, sent them at worst, probably sent a missile to that acre in Afghanistan and not told anyone. The way to prevent stirring up the terrorists was you take out these people who do it and then you don't tell anyone. Then you prevent the back and forth. But as far as the National Guard, and I'm upset that we went into Iraq too. I felt that was just wrong. They had nothing to do with 9/11. And that's what empowered Iran now and has caused all these problems in the Middle East. You take out Iraq and they've been at each other's throats for decades. What happens? Iran goes nuts. So, surprise, surprise. But anyway, and at the time I did support the Kuwait war, but in retrospect, I felt like we were just replacing one dictatorship with another, and they were cross drilling. But anyway, my point is, as far as the National Guard goes, look, we should have declared war. If you're doing a war, you have to declare a war. They've been doing all these, military actions since I think even Vietnam, and it's, which I was against. I would have been against that war. I was born in the middle of it. That's why I was preemie. My dad was an army doctor in it, and my mom was going through so much stress thinking he might be sent over. I was born early, and they tried to send him over, and luckily he wasn't. But I am against war unless absolutely necessary, like World War II. And I'm very horrified by this thing in Ukraine. We should have let them into NATO, and that would have prevented it. But yes, declare war, sure, and yes.
Thank you very much, Frederick. Okay. Louis, same question for you about the Defend the Guard legislation and movement.
Yes, I would support that legislation. I don't think that we should go to war when Congress and the people have not had a say and a vote. This is what you're saying. The last 30 years, war has been going on and Congress has not approved it. I happen to have been a reporter during the Contra War, when Reagan was told by Congress not to get involved. Remember the Contra-Iran affair? I was there. I was in Nicaragua and Honduras. I covered that the Contras, who were not these guerrilla fighters sitting in the jungle starving. They were highly resourced. They had tents, they had uniforms, they had all the weapons that the U.S. made sure was in their hands against the law. Once that happened, it pretty much became the way to do it. Just do the war and don't ask Congress. The representatives that we think are going to represent us had no vote, had no say. So yes, I would agree. We should not be involved in any of these wars unless the Congress approves it by law, by constitution, but also that the people are behind it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to go into 1-minute closing statements now. I appreciate so much that all of you came and took time out of your schedules to be here to help libertarians and liberty-minded individuals figure out who they should vote for. We're going to go clockwise again. We're going to start with James and then Renette and then Frederick, and we will close with Louis. So James, take it away.
I want to state why it is that my top priority, as noted in the voter's guide, is the legal recognition of the dignity of life at every stage. It's my top priority because the common good includes the good of each and every human being. Each and every human being has an inherent worth. Human rights are for human beings, all of them. For this reason, we need to be pro-life for the whole of life. We need a consistent ethics of life. No to capital punishment. No to the stockpiling of nuclear weapons. No to the destruction of the preborn. No to the putting down of the gravely ill. Yes to life.
Thank you very much, James. Okay, Renette, we'd love to hear from you.
I would like to talk less about my campaign and more about where we stand right now as a state and a nation. The media is underreporting the most important election in the history of California.
Yeah.
And as I said, we're expecting maybe 7 million people at most to vote out of 22 million. And once this happens, the die is cast. And what we do know for a fact is that 80% of people actually agree on 90% of the issues. I'm going to say that again. 80% of people agree on 90% of the issues. However, when it comes to the primary, the media underreports it Most people are not engaged in it. They're not invested in it. And what happens, we have a history of this, it's usually the extreme left and right who vote. They're the ones who actually throw the ball up at the net. And here comes the general election. And that 80%ers are looking at their two candidates saying, this is it. Once again, I'm having to vote for lesser of two evils. So my point is this. If you're hearing my voice, if you're watching this debate, please go out there and do everything in your power to get as many people to vote. Because the fewer people who vote, the easier it is to rig an election. That's another reason why the media underreports the importance of the primary. This is the most important election. Please go out there and get as many people as you can to vote, because the next 4 years are going to be really rocky, and the last 4 years are going to look like a cakewalk if we continue to do more of the same.
Thank you, Renette. Okay, let's go to Frederick now.
Okay. First of all, I think that we have to, in general, we have to stop the government from oppressing us and instead have them helping us to be all we can be and to be a loving society and world towards each other in this country and the whole world. I think if we had a small wealth tax, for instance, in this country, I mean, we have 1 billion people starving to death in the world. If we really had just a small wealth tax on wealth over $10 million, we could pay for things like, healthy organic produce for everyone in the country or world, and even bugs instead of meat, because meat is the cause of the global warming. If we keep up with the global warming, we're going to our state's going to be underwater soon. And also, as I said, in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it says we have equal right to not only equal and universal voting. And as I said, I'm the only candidate who's fought for 36 years to stop the government from arresting us for victimless and consensual crimes. This means drugs, sex work, etc. I mean, they have no right, but also a lot of those people would be voting. But also, they say we have the equal right to office, and an equal right to office means that we have to ban money from politics. And also, we have this problem where the government, by allowing the media to control the money in the media, that's the media is all about money, and that's what controls the politics. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, James. Okay, and for closing statements, I'm so sorry, Frederick. I'm looking right in the middle of the screen.
And I'll arrest the Electoral College. Okay.
Okay. For closing statements now, we're going to go to Luis.
Well, I think we need more choices, more voices. You can't make this country run and this state run with just two corporate-run parties. I'm not against Democrats or even Republicans. I'm against the control of our political arena by big money, by big corporations. Our voices aren't being seen. I have a people power campaign. I have a great volunteer team all across the state. I got people engaged who never were engaged. Are we going to get anywhere? The way the system is set up, we're not. Because we don't got the money, we don't got the big corporate donations. It's wrong. Democracy is at peril right now because of that. My slogan is, imagine a new California for shared well-being, then it's build it. I think the imagination needs to be fuller about the state, fuller about what we can do, fuller about what we can prevent, fuller about the issues that we're talking about, and then have that big dream and that big delivery. That's what I'm about. That's what my candidate's about. And I think that's what we should have as our electoral arena: more voices, more choices.
Thank you so much, Louis. So thank you everyone for participating, and thank you for those of you who are watching. Last day to vote in California in our primary elections is tomorrow. So if you are a voting person, please go out and do that. If you're interested in joining the Libertarian Party in California, you can join at ca.lp.org. And if you're interested in joining at the national level, you can join at lp.org. You can learn more about our party, our platform, and our positions. We care very much about your individual liberty. That's what we're passionate about. And we thank you again for making yourselves available to us and helping us make an informed choice tomorrow. Thank you all. We are all done. We'll see you later.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Love you all. Free the people. Thank you.
Thank you.